Reddit by Reddit recap. People of Reddit who were born into an upper class family but now make low to middle class wage. Has your perception of life changed much? I'm the youngest child of a doctor who did well from the 1950s on and played it smart with his money. Dad is rich. Mom's parents were both doctors, and in fact grandpa was up for a Nobel in medicine in the 50s, but ultimately got an Alaska reward instead. He and grandma traveled the globe doing research. Our home was filled with things from Africa and Brazil and God knows where. Well, I'm not cut out to be a doctor. I went to college to be a mechanical engineer. You know what that got me? $63K when I was making my best and laid off since 2009. I kept hearing that line from Lord of the Rings, "You are a lesser son of greater men." It was a massive mindfuck. Over the past few years I have dealt with that. I have not worked due to a combination of a shit economy that doesn't need engineers and the fact that both of my parents are quite ill, as are my wife's parents. As I haven't been working, I'm the guy who can come charging in at a moment's notice and take care of crisis, everything from getting my in-laws packed and moved to the assisted living facility to moving in with dad for a few months when mom had her stroke and he was feeling horrible guilt about sending her into the nursing home because he couldn't take care of her. My father was a successful business owner and my mother dedicated herself full-time to raising my sister and me. When we kids were finally both safely in college with good financial aid in place, my parents decided to take a big risk and move across the country to work on a fixer-upper property, which they hoped to get running as a motel. The next 3 years were the hardest my family has experienced. I sunk into a depression that led to withdrawing from school 1 or 2 credits away from a degree. My father invited me to come and help out with his new project, and so I went there with my fancy almost college education and watched impotently as bad decisions, a bad market, and bad luck ate away my parents' life savings, month after insolvent month. With the inevitable foreclosure only weeks away, I told my parents I'd go back to finish school and start paying my own way. I was cutting and running, but my parents never blamed me. They only blamed themselves for not being able to give me gas money to get there. They went with the lie and wished me the best, thanked me for my help, and waved goodbye with brave smiles. I only made it a couple miles down the 95 before I had to pull into a gas station and cry into the steering wheel, with the odds and ends of what had been a nice upper middle class upbringing packed in my slowly aging car. Grew up upper middle class. For my family that meant we had a swimming pool, trampoline, big screen TVs with surround sound systems. My sister and I each had our own bedrooms with TVs, laptops, and video game systems in them. We went on family vacations multiple times a year. My parents each had their own vehicle, and they bought my sister and I our own new vehicles when we got our licenses. We frequently ate out, went to the movies, went to amusement parks, got expensive brand name clothing, had a fancy dining room that we only ate at during holidays, had a fancy living room that only the adults were allowed to use, had cell phones in high school, etc. I never realized how much money we had until I graduated and moved across the country. Money just wasn't something I really had to think of. In some ways, I feel like I was spoiled, but in other ways, they did try to teach me good work ethics. I got my first job in a kitchen when I was 14, and they always made sure I was at work and doing a good job. On the other hand, if I ever wanted anything and didn't have my own money to buy it, I knew they would buy it for me without a second thought, unless it was ridiculous. They tried to talk me out of spending over $100 of my own money once on one outfit from Torrid, a shirt, pants, and a vest, but I really wanted it. But if I didn't have my own money I doubt I would have gotten it. Then I moved 2,000 miles away and suddenly had to pay for everything on my own. I know they would have helped me if I asked, but I wanted to pave my own path. It was hard. I had no concept of how much things cost. I had no concept of just how many things cost anything at all. My eyes were open to so many little things that people who don't have money had to deal with and think about, and I had to learn the mental financial gymnastics of how to make ends meet. I stupidly got a kitten and then couldn't afford to feed him regular cat food. so I resorted to cheap tuna and saltine crackers, which became a staple of my diet as well, because I just didn't have the money for a lot of other groceries. I could only afford the bare minimum for car insurance, which meant that, when I totaled my nice car they had bought me, that was it. It was gone. I spent about 3 years without a vehicle, because I just couldn't afford it. I was on food stamps, and living in government assisted housing, and I still couldn't afford day-to-day items. I hated pulling out that food stamp card at the supermarket. I hated having people over and not being able to offer them dinner, because I had just enough food for me, and that was about it. I couldn't wash my clothes regularly, because the laundromat wanted quarters I didn't have. My social life plummeted, because everything everybody wanted to do cost money. I was so embarrassed to say, I can't afford it, because someone would inevitably offer to pay my way, and it was embarrassing. After the 100th time of that happening, I didn't even want to say it, because I felt like I was taking advantage of my friend's generosity. So many little things that had never mattered before suddenly mattered a lot. No, I can't buy Girl Scout cookies. No, I can't come out to celebrate your birthday. No, I can't park in a pay-to-park garage. No, I can't go to the dentist for a cavity. No, I can't run to the store to get cold medicine when I'm sick. No, I can't leave work early today because I need the money. No, I can't buy new shoes when the old ones start falling apart. I'm doing a lot better now because I've been working at my place of business for almost 10 years and my pay has risen nicely in that time. I'd probably land right at the lowest end of middle class right now. I just got internet at home for the first time since I moved away from my parents' house 11 years ago. I'm a month or so away from being able to afford a new smartphone, and I'm going on vacation at the end of September. I do wonder if I'll ever be able to buy my own home instead of renting, but I'm only 29, and I feel like I've got time to worry about that in the future. Things are definitely looking up, and I actually feel grateful that I've gotten to experience two different sides of the financial spectrum. I feel like it helps me be more objective when it comes to money matters, and it helps me empathize and better understand the financial decisions of a wider selection of people. My parents were both high-ranking government employees. I grew up in Japan and never wanted for anything. Our house was on a cliff, and we had a koi pond, 4 cars, vacations to Hawaii, you name it. However, my father always instilled in me that it was his money, not my money. He was rich. I was not. Fast forward to me being 24, in debt, and getting evicted from my house. My parents were amazing at preparing me for the real world, but I never listened to them, or realized how much of a struggle it could be. I remember a phone call to my father during this time, where I was crying, and didn't know what to do, and he said something that resonated with me. Rich people don't get rich by buying things they can't afford. I doubled up on jobs and slowly crawled my way out of debt. It was hard work, but I learned a valuable lesson. It was great that my parents didn't offer me sympathy, because it forced me to accept that I was in this situation because of my own stupid decisions. Now I'm great at budgeting and realizing what I can and can't spend money on. It won't break my heart if I can't see a movie or eat out. I'll get to eventually. I grew up, and money was never an issue. I was spoiled. If I wanted it, I got it. I was depressed. I wanted to die. I did things that got me cut off from my family, and with a few bucks in my bank account I took a plane from California to Alaska and worked on random farms and eco-lodges up there for food and a place to stay. After 6 months of being uncomfortable and on the edge of having what I needed, I had never been more happy and comfortable in my life. I went home, and then within 2 weeks left for Argentina to work on farms again, this time bringing my best friend along. After another 6 months, and being blissfully happy owning nothing, and just experiencing the world, I moved home. I wanted stability. I got a job making $28,000 a year, and was living with my dad. A year later I met my wife. After 2 years of dating we decided to get married, and moved back to her home in Michigan. I found a job making $43,000 a year. We have a daughter. We are saving for our first home. I do worry about money, but we are comfortable and have what we need. I'm happier now, even though I have less money than I did before I was 20. I'm now 25. I slunk back into my college town and took on jobs that I'd always considered beneath me. Jobs with tips, jobs with hats and aprons. Part-time work at restaurants kept me afloat as I finished my degree. As I finally started learning how to manage my own life, I realized how much I had yet to learn about living and about other people. I never knew how it can mean the difference between a month that feels okay and a month of feeling vaguely hungry all the time. I never knew the amount of petty, sometimes unthinking injustice many employees endure from managers and customers simply because there is no other choice if you want that paycheck. And I never knew that a person's level of education or income has very little to do with the worth of their character. Some of the best friends I have now are people I honestly would have dismissed as townies in my undergrad years. Next month I'll be starting a full-time job with benefits, with enough pay to maybe help my parents out as they face retirement age. I thought about cutting up my ET card, but now I think I'll keep it in my wallet to remind me of the wolf that is always at the door and of the people who live their lives beating it back with brooms. My mother was born into a wealthy Vietnamese family and had everything: butlers, private drivers, cooks, multiple estates, boarding school, etc. Her father was a hotel owner and congressman. When the Vietnam War broke out, the communists invaded and imprisoned her father and mother, and soldiers occupied all of their estates. They escaped to the United States on a makeshift boat with literally $0 and worked their way up from there. My mom started working in a sweet shop making less than $2 an hour and worked her way through college. She then met my dad, who was working in a scrap metal factory, also a refugee working his way through college. They both took out loans as well for tuition. After college, my mom became an engineer working for a NASA contractor designing launch software for the space shuttle program. She and my dad raised us as ordinary middle-class folk and got me and my sister through college. I'm currently working as an actuary, by no means rich, but better off than my parents were during their working lives. And you know what? I'm glad that it has worked out this way. The circumstances that allowed dad to get wealthy are not likely to happen again in my lifetime. Grandma and grandpa were geniuses who did fantastic things for the field of medicine, but at a cost to family life. I can't realistically compare myself to any of them. It's a different time in history, and let's face it, not everyone can win a Nobel Prize. But I'm doing something that they couldn't. I'm taking care of two sets of parents in their decline and helping them to retain their comfort and dignity as much as possible, and helping my kids deal with it emotionally. I'm dependent upon my wife's income, at least for now, which has been hard to wrap my head around as an American man. But let's face it, if I were working as an engineer, would I have likely set the world on fire with my career? No. But can I set an example for my kids on how to love and support your family? Hell yes. And that will have a much more measurable impact on society than working as an engineer. I have been incredibly fortunate to have married a woman capable of supporting us both, obviously, but don't imagine for a moment that I don't work. I do. I just don't draw a paycheck from it. But we are both very grateful that I have this opportunity. TL. Doctor, money is not the most important thing in life. This has been a source of internal strife for me in recent weeks. I grew up going on great vacations, going out to eat at restaurants regularly, and being given a lot of really great opportunities. Now that I'm trying to establish myself in the workforce, all I can think about is how I can achieve the same level of comfort I had growing up, to the point where it's kind of a toxic anxiety-inducing attitude. My childhood set possibly unrealistic expectations and I have to deal with it. Best comment of the day. I had to go to the hospital recently. I didn't want to, but it was one of those problems where, if I didn't go I would probably be dead. I recall an EMT saying, "Wow, you lost a lot of blood," and a few doctors asking if I knew how a piece of metal got into my colon. I had an endoscopy thing and they fixed the giant ulcer. I was supposed to have a colonoscopy too, but I refused treatment and left way earlier than I should because I kept having panic attacks. That wasn't a lie, I was having bad panic attacks, but I did lie about the cause. I wasn't scared of the colonoscopy, I just knew I wouldn't be able to afford another treatment.